Welcome to the Tech Talks by Microsoft EMEA. My name is Manfred Helber. I'm a Microsoft Most Valuable Professional in the category Cloud and Data Center. And today in the Tech Talk session, we are talking about deployment, management, and monitoring of Windows Server 2022. If you are here in the live stream, feel free to send in your questions about the topic via the live chat and your feedback about the session and your feedback maybe about future topics. So you can use the chat on the YouTube channel you are watching. We are streaming on 2 different YouTube channels. You can use the chat there to send in your questions, to send in your comments. I will pick up the questions and try to answer them directly here in the show. Usually, if they are related to the topic, this will be possible here. So let's start with the deployment. And to mention something about the session today, we will see many live demos, because when we start with the deployment of Windows Server 2022, it's important to know that there are 2 different deployment options for the Windows Server operating system. I have prepared 2 virtual machines for this live demo, the server 43 and the server 42. These 2 servers will be installed with Windows Server 2022, and I will use the standard edition. We learned in the last Tech Talk that we have 3 editions: Essentials, Standard, and Data Center. And I will use the standard edition here in the first virtual machine. Let's connect to this machine. The physical installation is very similar. We only have the difference that we need some hardware specific drivers, and depending on your preferred hardware vendor, you will need additional driver packages, firmwares, or you have integrated them in the deployment process. So the first step of the installation asks about the language to install and the time and currency format and keyboard input method. I'm based here in Germany, so I will leave the language to install English. This is my recommendation. Independently, what's your preferred language is, I would recommend always to install the server operating system in English language. But for sure, my region, I will change to my region here, and the keyboard layout to ensure that it will be comfortable to use my keyboard layout I have here on my desk. So then in the next step, I have the Install Now option. I will install this operating system here. And the setup is starting. It's checking some settings on this machine, and it asks about the product key. So depending on the channel where you received your Windows Server operating system, a recommendation would be to use a reseller option kit license, so the OEM specific version of your preferred vendor. Then if you have a physical installation, you will receive an installation key, an activation key with the core license sticker you have on your server. Usually you have this core license sticker. You should have this core license sticker on your server. For our demo, I could decide to choose I don't have a product key, so I can install the OS. I cannot use it for a longer time, but I can install it, I can configure it, and I can enter a key at a later point of time. But I will use the automatic virtual machine activation key here. It's here the German language version. I will switch to the English version document, because my host is a Windows Server 2022 data center Hyper-V host, and I'm installing a virtual machine, and I will use this key here. So this key is not a secret. It's public available on the Microsoft website on docs.microsoft.com, because you only can use this key if you are running on a data center host that is activated by Microsoft. So I installed my data center host with a data center key I bought with my hardware. This data center host is activated at Microsoft, and so I now can use the automatic virtual machine activation key inside the VM. So I don't have to configure anything else for automatic virtual machine activation. I'm only using this key, and because I want to install the standard edition, I'm using here the standard key, because when my host is data center, I'm allowed to run virtual machines with essentials. We learned in the last live stream that standard and essentials are identical regarding the bits and bytes. So we can install standard inside the virtual machine and data center inside the virtual machine. Both is possible regarding the licensing terms. So now we have the next choice, because now we are asked if we want to install server standard. And this means it will install a server core installation, or if we want to have the full desktop experience. So if server standard as a server core installation is recommended, then the question is, what's about the desktop experience? Here we don't have information that it's not recommended or something like this, but here we can see we have the full graphical user interface, and this can be helpful if we have an application that requires this full desktop experience. So let's install the first server with the full desktop experience. I have to accept the licensing terms, and then I can install this machine. Important is we have the choice between upgrade and custom installation. We have to select custom installation. If we want to run an in-place upgrade, then the requirement is to start the previous operating system. For in-place upgrade, it can be Windows Server 2019 or Windows Server 2016. And from this running previous Windows Server operating system, we can start the setup of Windows Server 2022, and then we can choose this upgrade option here to upgrade in place from the previous version to Windows Server 2022. So we'll select my drive, the unallocated space here. If you have specific requirements, for example, specific partition sizes and so on, you can create new partitions here. You can format existing, you can delete existing or extend. You can load drivers. If you have, for example, a RAID controller, a redundant array controller that needs a driver that is not part of the Windows Server OS installation, then we can inject this driver here to ensure that we also see the drives that are connected to this actually maybe in the setup process not supported controller type. Okay, I don't want to specify anything here. I only click on next, and I will see the setup starts. Let's choose the next machine, the 43. The steps will be very similar. I will start this machine. I will press any key to start the setup of Windows Server 2022. And I will decide to install this machine as a server core. So I started this setup later. The first setup is already running. This is the graphical setup. This is the setup where I will decide for server core. So let's select the language, install now. I will use the automatic virtual machine activation key again, because this activates against the host. Let's type the key here. And now in the next step, we choose the server standard. This means this will install a server core, a reduced graphical user interface. Let's decide for this option. So we have a graphical server on the right-hand side, and the setup is also graphical here with the server core here. But we will see we have a difference when the OS is completely installed, because the server core has a reduced graphical user interface. Because it has a reduced graphical user interface, it has a reduced footprint, so we need less patches. And we will talk about the management in a few minutes. And there we will see when we use the Windows Admin Center, the recommended management tool, we nearly have no difference. What's interesting, I'm not sure if we will see this here, but the footprint of the server core installation, so this one on the left-hand side, is about half the size of the graphical user interface installation. This means I started with the installation on the left-hand side later, but it's already at 50, 60%. Yes, the setup that started earlier is at 85%, but I assume the server core installation will finish earlier because it's faster, because we have less amount of data to copy, we have less services to configure. The difference was 20% when I started talking about this topic, and now they are nearly on the same level. So actually 10% difference here, but we will see we have the installing features, installing updates, and finishing up. And so at the server core, at the machine at the left-hand side, I will see the log on screen earlier than on the machine on the right-hand side. I'm absolutely sure about this. If not, I think if you look at the time, you can see I started with this machine on the left-hand side more than about 5 minutes later than on the machine on the right-hand side. So it's not important that this machine here is, it seems to be faster, because this is only the installation. We run this once, this installation, and then the machine is installed. But you can imagine this machine is faster in every reboot. It needs less patches. When we have a running workload on this machine, the performance is comparable. So it's not the situation that the server core is faster when you install an Exchange server there, or a SQL server or something like this. So they now are nearly on the same level regarding the time getting ready on both of the machines. And keep in mind, I started later at the server 43 at the machine on the left-hand side. So let's give the machines a few additional seconds. So this machine here now restarts again. The 42 machine is still finishing or getting ready the configuration. Now the 42 machine is restarting again. And now we see the log on screen on the server core machine. The log on screen will be there on the graphical user interface machine. It's now there, but as I mentioned several times, I started several minutes later on the server core machine. So we can see it has less data to copy. So let's first configure the graphical user interface machine. I think you are familiar with this. I can specify a password at the first login. And then this machine is finalizing the settings, and I'm logging in with my user. It's a local login. This machine is actually in a local work group. It's not domain joined, but I have prepared a domain for us. So we will use this domain in the next step. The server manager is starting. I think you are familiar with the server manager. The server manager is our traditional management tool for Windows Server operating systems. We have the server manager since Windows Server 2008 or something like this. We have it in a version that is similar to the version we are using today since Windows Server 2012. And when we are looking at this here, then we can see a pop-up screen that says, oh, there's something new to manage Windows Server. It's the Windows Admin Center. We will use the Windows Admin Center in a few minutes because this is the recommended management tool. I will close this window because I will first configure this local server. Because the server manager is still there, you can still use the server manager to, for example, rename the computer. Let's say this is the D114-SRV42, and this machine is domain joined or should be domain joined. This is my domain. I will specify these values and click on OK. The user I will use for the domain join is the administrator, and this user has a password. And after finishing this, this machine will restart. It needs a restart for the renaming operation. And this machine will also be domain joined in my domain I'm using here. So takes a moment. Welcome to the domain mhdemolab.de. Okay, I want to confirm this, and I need a restart here. Let's do the same steps on this server core operating system. First step is to log in. Okay, I have to specify a password, and you can see we don't have a full graphical user interface, but we have a server configuration tool that starts at the first login. For this administrator user here, this config is loading. So here we can see, welcome to Windows Server 2022 standard. Here we can see it's a computer that's in a work group. The computer name is a randomly generated computer name. We have remote management, update settings, and so on. So I could use the number 1 to specify the domain or the work group, and the number 2 to remain the computer. So let's do this. I check number 1, and I want to choose a D for domain, and the domain is mhdemolab.de. And I want to specify a user, mhdemolab /administrator. This user is capable to add users. I need a password. Sorry, not users, computers. Joining the machine to the domain. The next question is if I want to rename the computer. And yes, for sure, I also want to rename this machine here. So let's wait for the joining to the domain. The target account name is incorrect. Maybe I have a typo in here. Administrator failed to join the domain mhdemolab.de. I'm not seeing any typo here. Let's see for the settings of the machine, because for sure we need a network connectivity, D114 VMLAN 01. So let's try this again. Let's rename the computer first. Maybe I have a randomly generated computer name that had an issue. I want to use the D114 SRV43. Restart now, yes. The reason why I tried to do this in one step was to avoid the second restart. So when I rename the computer first, I have a restart, and when then I do the domain join, I have a second restart. So let's check if maybe this was the reason of the issue. So I'm logging into this machine. The sconfig, the server configuration tool, is loading here. And now I will try the number 1 again to join the D for the domain. The name of the domain is mhdemolab.de. The user is mhdemolab /administrator. The password, joining the domain. Let's see if it works now. So we could have an issue with an IP address, name resolution, or things like this. So you can see at the server core, So here, successfully joined the domain. Do you want to change the computer name? So it was an issue with this randomly generated computer name. You have to know I'm doing a lot of demos here, and maybe there was a duplicate randomly generated computer name. This might happen. No, I don't want to change the computer name because I already did this before. I want to restart, and now this machine is also joined to the domain. You can see the handling of the server core is different compared to the server with the graphical user interface. When I want to configure additional things here, so let's log in again here at this machine. This config is loading. So we can see we have other options like, for example, installing updates. Yeah. Update settings, and then number 6, installing updates, network settings, date and time. Maybe you have seen that the time zone is not correct here. I can change date and time, and I can say, okay, and here you can see we have a graphical window because server core is not without windows. It's only with a reduced graphical user interface. If I want to change the time zone here, I want to use another user, administrator at mhdemolab.de, and the password. It's a new profile here. I'm logging in with a domain user. And you can see with the domain user here, the server manager starts. For sure, we can still use the server manager. We have the graphical user interface here. We can manage our server here. We have the recommendation to use the Windows Admin Center. And for sure, we can also change, for example, the time zone here, this machine, but here with a full graphical user experience we have here. So let's also change here. Okay, so a step back to the server core. If we want to switch the user there, I can log off with the option 12. Yes, I want to log off from this machine. I can log in by pressing Control Alt Delete. I can type escape and escape again to switch to another user, and the user can be administrator at mhdemolab.de with the password. Okay, so, but the target is not to use this direct graphical user interface or server core interface we have seen here. The idea is for the future of management of Windows Server to use the Windows Admin Center. Windows Admin Center is a small web-based tool we install on premises. So Windows Admin Center is installed on premises. We have seen this recommendation to use Windows Admin Center on one of our servers. But important is to know we can install the Windows Admin Center on a graphical server or on a server core. We could install the Windows Admin Center on each server on the network, but this is not the recommendation. My recommendation is to choose the option where we install the Windows Admin Center on a management host. This is what we will do. The Windows Admin Center is pre-installed. We will use it on this management host. If you want to have a detailed information about how to install Windows Admin Center, you can go to my web page, to the blog, and on this blog, manfredhelber.de/blog, you will see a detailed step-by-step guide how to install the Windows Admin Center. So the Windows Admin Center installation is not very complicated. It's a setup routine. It's next, next, next with some settings. What's important to know, we need a certificate in this management server deployment here. We don't have any agents installed on the managed nodes. So on these servers that are managed by the Windows Admin Center, we don't need any agents to install because Windows Admin Center uses PowerShell Remote and Windows Remote Management instrumentation. An alternate deployment option would be to install the Windows Admin Center directly on a management workstation. The difference between option number 1 and option number 2 is that option number 1 is focused on one user that uses the Windows Admin Center. The option number 2 is optimized for a larger amount of administrative users that access the target services via the Windows Admin Center. It would also be possible, but it's not my recommendation, to install the Windows Admin Center on a managed node. This is what the server manager told us. It says, oh, here's a new server, you can install the Windows Admin Center. I would not recommend to install the Windows Admin Center on every server. And what's also possible to have a high available configuration of the Windows Admin Center. Important is to know if your Windows Admin Center is not working, your services are still working. So our services are still running on our target hosts. So if Windows Admin Center is down, if we have an issue there, our services on the target nodes are still running because we don't have an mandatory interaction between them. So let's have a look at the management of these two nodes in Windows Admin Center, and it will work out of the box because we have installed these machines together and both have the remote management enabled. This is default in Windows Server. It's default in Windows Server 2022. It's default in Windows Server 2016. So the remote management, it's not remote desktop, it's remote management. This is always enabled. We don't need the remote desktop for Windows Admin Center management, but the remote management must be enabled. And this is the default value in the actual supported Windows Server operating systems. So Windows Admin Center supports every Windows Server OS, starting with Windows Server 2016 for management. On Windows Server 2012 and 2012 R2, we have to install the Windows Management Framework update. Please keep in mind that Windows Server 2012 and 2012 R2 will be end of support in October 2023, so in about 1 year. 1 year and a few months. And there, maybe it's a good idea to migrate these previous Windows Server versions to a new Windows Server version where we have the remote management directly integrated. So let's switch to my Windows Admin Center machine here. So this is a machine where I have installed Windows Admin Center, and I have already several Windows servers that are managed by this Windows Admin Center, but we will add our two new servers we installed together. So I can add new machines here in the Windows Admin Center, and I will add servers. We can add clusters, we can create new clusters, we can add client PCs for management, we can add Azure VMs, and when we can create new Azure VMs. I want to add servers here for management. And we can add them by typing the name or importing a list or searching the Active Directory. I will type the name D114-SRV42. Windows Admin Center is searching for this name. It's validating the DNS resolution, and it's validating if the machine is reachable, if the machine is online. Yes, it found the server 42. I want to add this machine 42, and I want to add another one. I want to add the servers, the D114-SRV43. Keep in mind, 42 was the graphical server, 43 was the server core installation. It's again searching for this machine, it's online, and I can add this machine here. Now we'll see in the list the two machines. I've never connected to these machines here, and I will connect now to the server 42. So, and we can see several similar management tools or elements we have in our server manager. So for example, I can see here the machine, the computer name. I can see here the CPU. It's an Intel-based machine. It's a virtual machine, yes, but it sees the CPU of the physical host. We have the Windows Server 2022 standard here. We can on the left-hand side, configure the firewall. We can have a look at the events, the devices, local users and groups, installed apps. We could, for example, go for roles and features and install some additional roles, maybe file services, maybe Hyper-V, whatever we want to use on this machine. In a traditional environment, you would use the server manager and click on add or remove roles and features. We can do so, manage, add roles and features. This is the same thing I'm doing here. I selected on this machine roles and features. The great thing about this Windows Admin Center is that we can open an additional tab. So I can go to Windows Admin Center, right-click on it, and open the link in a new tab. Then I have a new Windows Admin Center tab open here, and I can browse here to the server 43. I have to authenticate again because this is a new session here to ensure that the credentials are correct. And then we can, in the Windows Admin Center, also manage this machine. Remember, this was the server core installation. Let's go to the roles and features. When you manage via Windows Admin Center, you will not really see a difference. So as soon as you use the Windows Admin Center as your primary management tool, you will not have any limitations regarding the graphical management of a server core installation. This is exactly this machine where we are working on. I can install roles and features. I can configure scheduled tasks. I can configure the system insights. I could handle the update management. I don't have to go to the server core console and type the number 6 to select and install updates. I can directly go to updates, select the updates here, and check for install them now. I can check online for additional updates. I can restart immediately or have a scheduled restart. So in my opinion, very comfortable, and I would absolutely recommend to you to use the Windows Admin Center for management of Windows Server operating systems, independently if you have a graphical user interface installation or a server core installation. So when it comes to the monitoring part, then we have the situation, there are some monitoring tools already in the Windows Admin Center integrated. So when we go to the Windows Admin Center, for example, we have the overview. And here we can see we can monitor the CPU utilization, the memory utilization, the Ethernet utilization or usage. I have this nice graphics here where I can see the last 60 seconds. So it's always the last 60 seconds after the time when I entered the Windows Admin Center, because there's no database behind it. It's a little bit different in a storage spaces direct scenario with Windows Server 2019 or 2022 or with Azure Stack HCI OS. There we have a cluster performance history volume where also historical data is stored. Here we always see the real life data. This means the last 60 seconds. But it's helpful to monitor the performance here. It's also helpful to use things like, for example, the performance monitor. This is the new perfmon in Windows Admin Center. Here we can create a blank workspace. We could say, for example, let's add a counter. And if you ever used the perfmon, you know that it was not very comfortable to add counters there because we don't have a search functionality. We always had to select from this long list of counters. Now we can search here. So when we have the counter object list here loaded, we can use the drop down options here to list all the objects and then also to search for specifics. So we can search, for example, for CPU, for memory, for system, and add these counters here to build a performance monitor workspace that can be saved. Oh, here it says I have an issue in accessing the remote registry. So let's try this again here on the other machine. We had some issue, I think you remember, with the second server we added here. Maybe it has still an issue in the name resolution. Let's checking the machine here. I want to add counters, loading the objects here. But what we can see here already, we can save this workspace. We can change the settings, so how it will be visualized. And the most great thing is that we have the search option here. So we can search, for example, encounter something like here, for example, system or things like this. So performance monitor. We also have the package monitor. I will not wait for this till it's completely loaded because we have additional monitoring here. The package monitor for networking and so on. But the difficult thing is this is always real time. So there's no notification behind it. We have in several areas here. So this performance information where we can see what happens actually, what load is there actually. But if you need a long-term monitoring, the recommendation is to use the hybrid capabilities of Windows Admin Center. And Windows Admin Center is very, very powerful in these hybrid topics because we have an hybrid admin center and it supports both. It supports the integration of Azure services like Azure Monitor, for example, or Azure Update Management, or great technologies like Azure Arc for servers. But it also supports to, for example, back up data to Azure. So you can back up your data to Azure, you can recover your systems to Azure, or you can use Azure Monitor to monitor your on-premises systems. And all these hybrid capabilities in Windows Admin Center can be found in the Azure Hybrid Center here. Let's have a look at the Azure Hybrid Center in the Windows Admin Center. Because when we look at previous Windows Server operating systems, we never had a complete monitoring solution integrated. We have the System Center Operations Manager as a Microsoft provided on-premises installable monitoring solution for your environment, or we can use the Azure Monitor as a hybrid service. So let's see here the Azure Hybrid Center. In the Azure Hybrid Center, we can see the first step to set up Azure Arc. And then we can use the additional services here. So this is recommended. It's not mandatory to set up Azure Arc. But Azure Arc is really, really helpful when you want to use additional hybrid services. So when we have enabled this server for Azure Arc, we can decide to configure Azure Monitor via the Windows Admin Center, or we could deploy the Azure Monitor via the Azure Portal. So let's say Azure Arc is something like the Azure Management Agent for Windows Server. Azure Arc is also available for SQL Server. It's also available for Azure Stack HCI and so on. But this Azure Arc configuration here, it's exactly this location here means we install something like a management agent for this server to be able to manage this server by Microsoft Azure. Installing an agent Let's see the installed apps on this machine. I will go to the installed apps, and I can see here this server actually has installed Microsoft Edge and the Edge update. Nothing else. So now let's go to the Azure Hybrid Center. We could only configure Azure Monitor. This also would be possible, but my recommendation is to first configure Azure Arc. And I will do this. I will set up Azure Arc. And this easy setup of Azure Arc is possible because I already logged in with my Azure credentials. I will show you this when the Azure Arc onboarding has finished. We want to have a new resource group. It's the Tech Talk EMEA. Let's do it like this. Resource group Tech Talk EMEA, Azure region. I will use West Europe. Set up the Azure Arc. Created resource group, and now it sets up Azure Arc for servers. When the Azure Arc setup for servers has finished, we will find an Azure Connected Machine agent on this server 42 we are actually managing. So it installs an agent on the target server to bring us this additional Azure capabilities we have here. This agent has a size of something like 150 megabytes, I think so. So it needs some time to download the agent and to deploy it on the target machine. I will not close this window here to ensure that we see what happens here, but I will connect to the server 42 again and have a look at the installed apps. Maybe we can already see something there, installed apps. So let's load the list. Oh yes, and we already have the Azure Connected Machine agent. It was not there when we looked at this list 3 minutes before. It's not 150, it's 194 megabytes. This is the Azure Connected Machine agent. It was installed recently with this action of Azure Arc enablement of this server. So set up Azure Arc for servers has finished. Now I can click on the installed services. And I have to refresh here. Maybe this list is not up to date. And you should always give the Windows Admin Center some time to refresh the lists, to finish the server configuration. Also, Azure needs some time to finish the configuration of the servers. So let's see, I refresh here, Azure Arc is configured. So now I can go to Azure Arc for servers, or I can view the server in Azure. Let's view the server in Azure, and it might happen that it's actually not completely there, but we are lucky today. So the resources were created completely. Now I'm in the Azure Portal. So the Azure Portal is linked directly to my Windows Admin Center. And I can use several management tasks here directly in the Azure Portal. I could configure the security. I could configure the update management. I could configure the insights, the logs. I could use the extensions. So for example, when I click on Add here, I could provide the log analytics agent for Azure Arc. This would be a mandatory agent for Azure Monitor. So this is one possible way to go this way. We can also use the overview and say, oh, I want to configure the monitoring capabilities for this machine. This would also possible. Actually, in preview is the option to use the Windows Admin Center from the Azure Portal. I could also bring the Admin Center here directly to the Azure Portal. Or for sure, I can go back to the Windows Admin Center, can say, okay, Azure Arc is enabled. I understand what the power of Azure Arc is, because in the future, I don't need to connect to each machine to configure this machine, because I can deploy policies. I can deploy additional agents via the Azure Portal. For sure, we can also use the traditional way to use Azure Monitor in the Windows Admin Center to set this up here. I can decide for setting up monitoring and alerts here in the Windows Admin Center. I want to use the Azure sponsorship. Resource group can be my, sometimes I have so many resource groups here. So maybe I will, oh, yes, here's the Tech Talk. I can use the Tech Talk resource group, and I can use the Tech Talk EMEA log. This is the log analytics workspace. I will also use West Europe here. Important is, for sure, when we use this additional cloud-based services, we have costs for this. These are hybrid services. Log Analytics produces, this is the service behind Azure Monitor, produces costs based on the amount of data that is analyzed. And I want to set up this here, setting up monitoring in Azure. Now it creates the Log Analytics workspace in Azure, and it installs 2 additional agents on the target server. So actually, we have the Azure Connected Machine agent. This is for Azure Arc. And it's important to understand this again. Azure Arc agent. Let's do it this way. This is the Azure Arc agent. And if I would have disabled my Windows Admin Center now, uninstalled the Windows Admin Center, then I would have still the Azure Connected Machine agent on the target server. And I would have been able to deploy, for example, Azure Monitoring via the Azure Portal. And this is great when you think a little bit about the future. Maybe we have additional agents, backup agent we want to deploy, security agents, so the Defender for Endpoint and so on. This can all be managed via the Azure Arc connectivity here. Let's refresh if the 2 agents for Azure Monitor are already there. No, they are still in deployment. Let's see if it's running here. Oh, Azure Monitor has encountered an error. I had this several times in the last days that it told me that there might be some string that is misconfigured. So let's choose the other option. Let's go to the Azure Portal. And let's say, okay, I want to use the additional monitoring capabilities here. I want to enable them here. I can do this here, or I can decide to deploy the extensions. I want to deploy the extension on this machine. So now I'm in the Azure Portal. I'm using the plan B for the deployment of the Log Analytics agent. I want to deploy this here. So let's preview this here. Sorry, I need a workspace ID here, and I need an workspace agent. Sorry, we don't have the extension selected here. Usually we should be able to deploy it directly here and it should list me my workspace ID and the workspace key. Let me show this on a machine for you in a few minutes where I've already pre-configured this because I don't want to enter the keys here. They are usually for internal use, and usually it should show this here. So the way is, I hope this is clear how it works. The way is we have 2 options to configure Azure Monitor. It didn't work on exactly this machine. I will try to fix this in the live demo. If not, I will show you an additional machine where Azure Monitor was already configured, because when I go to my Azure Portal, I cannot only access the server 42, I can access all my Azure Arc enabled machines. And this is the great thing about Azure Arc. Here we have Azure Arc. Here I can see all my servers here in the list. You can see the servers that are offline. You can see the servers that are connected and online. We can see our server the server 42 we just entered here. We can configure the server 43. If we add the server here, we can see the resource group we used here. We can see the subscription we are using here. And for sure, we could, for example, decide to go to the server 21 here. It's a server I entered previously. And we can exactly see the configuration on this server, on this machine here, including also the installed extensions here, including also things like the log configuration, the monitoring insights, the policies we have configured here. And for such a server that was successfully entered to the Azure Monitor via the agent deployment, you can see things like alerts. You can see things like app logs, the auditing. And the great thing is we can use the email notification here to be notified about changes, about warnings, about alerts, and this all managed by the Azure Arc and Azure Monitor integration here. And as you can see on the left-hand side, the Azure Arc capability that enable additional things like monitoring, update management, and so on, they are not only available for servers, they are also available for SQL servers, they are available for Azure Stack HCI, for Kubernetes clusters, and so on. So this is really, really powerful. And I'm looking forward to many, many new features we will see in the Azure Arc here. So the idea is to really enable every server for Azure Arc. This is not mandatory. This is not a requirement, but it's strongly recommended because this here enables the management agent for the future for the Windows Server operating systems here. So we deployed Windows Server. We integrated the servers in the Windows Admin Center. We enabled the Azure Arc integration. We had, unfortunately, in the live demo an error in enable Azure monitoring because of this not matching string we have seen here, where the onboarding mechanism in Azure Monitor actually has an issue. But I'm sure this will be fixed soon. Unfortunately, it will not be fixed within this live demo, but I think you can imagine how this works. You just click on the setup like we did it with the Azure Arc, and then it will be configured here. Unfortunately, you have seen this. We had the issue here with the setup because this string couldn't be written. I assume if we try this again, we will have the same error because I had this a few minutes ago or half an hour ago when I did my final testing for the session, where it also had an issue here. We can create a new resource group to test this. And we can use this here for the log, but I'm afraid that this will run in an issue here again. If you have this in a real environment, in a production environment, then you have to keep in mind this is an Azure service you are using. Then for sure you can use the support in Azure to get help about this issue. So you can just click on help and support to ensure that the Azure support will work for you and help you to fix this issue that's actually not based on my local machine, but somehow on the onboarding process here for the Azure Monitor. Okay, hopefully you could see how powerful the management of Windows Server 2022 with Windows Admin Center is. My recommendation is absolutely to use it. You can download it for free by Microsoft. You will find a detailed installation guide on my blog where you can see details about how to install Windows Admin Center. And for sure, you can also get an information about the download here. I will show you the blog article about the installation here. And I think I already mentioned it, that we have an certificate we need. Here we have the installing and configuring Windows Admin Center for Windows Server 2022 management. And this is a detailed step-by-step article with all the required steps you need to configure the Windows Admin Center on a Windows Server 2022 system to manage additional Windows Server 2022 work. Okay, so thank you for your time today. If you have any questions about Windows Server deployment, Windows Admin Center management, or monitoring of Windows Server, feel free to use the chat to send in your questions or your comments. I'm looking forward to have you here in 1 week, next Monday on 12 p.m. Central Eastern Time again for Azure Virtual Desktop on Azure Stack HCI. It's a very popular topic because maybe you have heard that the Microsoft 365 apps are not supported on a Windows Server 2022 based remote desktop services session host. And Azure Virtual Desktop on Azure Stack HCI is a great solution to bring this technology to on-premises. And maybe you have additional questions, then feel free to join tomorrow at 1 p.m. for the Microsoft Q&A. There you can bring all your questions you have about licensing, about management, about installation, all your questions about Windows Server, Windows Client, Office, Microsoft 365, and I will be your host here to take the questions and answer them live in the session. So thank you for your time. Looking forward to have you here tomorrow at the Tech Talk Q&A and next Monday on the Tech Talk about Azure Virtual Desktop on Azure Stack HCI. Thank you for your time. See you tomorrow and next week. Bye.